Thanks so much for joining us on the podcast.
Hello, how are you doing? It's wonderful to be here.
So, I always like to ask our guests first off about how they found their way into the herbal and holistic healing world. So, what was your journey like?
It's actually funny that you should start off with that question because for some reason the other day I was because I was looking at my aloe vera and I was remembering how my mother always had an aloe vera plant in the house, and this is in the state of Colorado, which is pretty high arid. But I was fascinated from childhood that she would say, "Oh, you have a boo boo, break off this part of the plant," and that just was like to a child thinking it's all right here. Everything we need could be in a house plant or out in the yard or in the garden or in the forest. And I was just remembering my mother because she has passed away and thinking about just that little aspect of her that she had that in the house and would recommend it over an ointment from a pharmacy. That got my brain started thinking, wow, nature might have what we need. I remember as a child trying to make we in Colorado we called it Indian gum. I know that's not like appropriate, but that's what we called it in Colorado, where you take tumbleweeds and break open the stem, and there's this gummy material. And I learned that Native Americans and First Nations would chew on that. So I would chew on it, and then my friend and I decided we were going to make we were going to make and market chewing gum out of tumbleweed interiors. So I always had this fascination that there were things out there in nature that we could, you know, choose instead of stuff from the store.
Incredible. I didn't know that about the tumbleweeds, and I'd love to get a link to your gum company if that's
Yes, it was very profitable.
So eventually you found your way into Ayurveda, a tradition that comes out of India, and it's my understanding, but of course, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that the sort of translation is the science of life or something similar to that.
Mhm.
So I'm curious about how you went down that, how you found that practice, that philosophy, and also, as such an ancient practice, how you are defining that in a way that is practical for our modern life.
Mm. Yeah. Um, Always been fascinated by ancient history. So I was actually paying attention in world history class when they talked about Mohenjo-daro and Harappa and the Indus River Valley. I was paying attention when they talked about Mesopotamia and the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. These were all things that sparked my imagination. But uh, actually learning that there was something called Ayurveda, which Veda means knowledge and Ayur means life. So yes, knowledge of life, science of life. Um, Started in 1996. I was getting my training in massage therapy, and I was invited to start working in a spa. And she basically said, I'm going to teach you everything you need to know. And she introduced me to meditation, yoga, Ayurveda, all of these things. And I just started reading. So it really started right then, and it caught me immediately. So by the time chose to go to school for Ayurvedic medicine and Ayurvedic traditions, as my teacher said, and I love to tell people this, she said, if you're sitting here, you're here to remember. You're not learning this for the first time. You're drawn to this because it's a remembering. And it felt like that in her classes. Yes, we had crazy blue book exams where we had to have all these notes, but the daily learning was gathering around her and just absorbing and feeling that knowledge settle into our own tissues.
Oh, lovely. Lovely. And yeah, I've heard that as well along my travels that, the practice of herbalism really is a remembering, and it's something that is in all the cells of our body. There is a knowledge there that we evolved alongside these plants and these forces of nature are hugely in and what we are made of. So we do have that capacity to really remember those things. So Ayurveda is huge. It's a huge subject. And I know that it can be a little daunting for some folks, especially folks who, don't have maybe any background in the language also, because there is very much a lot of language differences, although I'm sure they can be described using English or whatever other language folks are working with. But it's really the doshas, I think, are one of the first things that people hear about. So, what is your explanation for the doshas, and what are people often misunderstanding about them?
Yeah, I think what I get a lot is people think that the doshas are kind of like astrology, you know. Either they think that it's, you know, rigid or an excuse. Well, I'm a vata, so of course I chew gum and walk at the same time. I'm a kapha, so of course I want to stay in bed longer, you know. Oh, I'm an Aries, of course I have a fiery temper and I'm going to jump right at, you know. Um, whether it's astrology or even Vedic astrology, which is used, by the way, in Ayurveda, and is as accurate as doing pulse diagnosis and all the other intake, believe it or not. These are windows into understanding ourselves. You know, the doshas are not boxes that we want to trap ourselves in. And our society, our modern society, wants to say, this is good and this is bad. Oh, kapha is a rounder figure, hard to lose weight. Oh, I don't want that. You know, I'm always telling people the kapha dosha, you're not supposed to have favorites, but in the origins of Ayurveda, when things were being written down, to have strong kapha dosha meant that you'd be strong, you'd have endurance, you'd have good immunity, you'd bear children well. If you were a man, you could work hard, or you would have great vitality, and you'd remember things a long time, and you have beautiful whites of your eyes and beautiful thick clear skin and thick hair. Like, there were all these wonderful things to talk about kapha, you know, and for them to say kapha is like a beautiful cow, and we're like, cow. You know, so we self-criticize around the doshas based on our modern life. And so for me, I really want people to understand that these are windows into self-understanding. When we understand ourselves, we know what our strengths and weaknesses are, and we can learn to balance the two. We can use our strengths to overcome our weaknesses. We can get ahead of our weaknesses. You know, if you know that you have a kapha respiratory system, and that if you catch anything, it's going to go straight to your lungs, and you're going to have mucus in the lungs and congestion, and that's going to carry you through for 2 months in the winter. Then next year, prior to winter, you're going to do everything you can to clear those lungs, clear out that extra fluid, not eat things that contribute to that. So it's the purest expression of self-love, Ayurveda, because it's knowing yourself, accepting yourself, and taking care of yourself to be the best self that you can possibly be.
Yeah. Yeah, I
There's a
hear what
little
you're
story
saying.
to explain the doshas too that kind of ties into the Greek humors. I don't know if we have time for a story. I could give a
Yeah,
little demonstration of it.
love that.
Okay. I think this is helpful. I remember who came up with this. It wasn't me. Uh, Old philosopher. Um, there's this route from one village to another, and it's the most traveled route. It's kind of a one-lane track, no carts, just people and donkeys or people and horses. And people travel that route to bring their goods to trade or to go to the other village to work. And so it's an important route. And one day, a vata, or melancholic individual, uh, melancholic is the Greek humor that is very similar to vata, is walking along the path and comes around a corner, and there's this huge boulder blocking the path. And that person just says, I knew it. Oh no, what am I going to do? This is terrible. I'm supposed to take these things to the next village, and I'm supposed to trade them and bring back money, and I can't do it tomorrow. And oh no. And they're just sobbing and wringing their hands and stressing about it in their head and just anxious and not able to come to a solution. And along comes the choleric individual, the pitta individual, and sees the vata and is kind of like, oh, useless, can't figure anything out. Obviously, I'm going to push this rock out of the way. And they start pushing and they start kicking and they get their back against it and they start cursing and they start jumping up and down and they're red in the face and they're pushing and pulling and they're saying, come on, help me, come on, let's go. We just got to get this out of the way. And along comes the phlegmatic individual, the kapha, who really didn't want to leave the village anyway and was just like, today is not the day anyway, and is kind of sauntering along and has lots of bags full of snacks and pockets full of snacks and, is just moving slowly along, comes around the corner, sees this scene going on, pauses a minute, doesn't really say anything, and just kind of sits back and sits by the side of the root and just decides to take a break. Just really isn't going to get involved, isn't going to get close enough. So nothing is happening. And then finally along comes a sanguine individual, tridoshic, balanced, is exhibiting the best of all of their doshic qualities and comes around the corner and sees this scene. The kapha phlegmatic is sitting on the ground, just could care less and is just like, whatever, I'm probably just going to go back home today. The vata is crying and stressing and talking about all the things that aren't going to happen. The pitta is red in the face and sweating and pushing and cursing. And the sanguine individual looks up and looks down and backs up a little bit. And, maybe they find another route around the rock. Maybe they get everybody together and say, hey, let's all go back to the village and get more people and we'll get this out of the way. The sanguine individual is calm and collected and uses all of the doshic influences. The pitta is going to be organizing the crew, right? The vata is going to be recruiting everybody and talking to everybody excitedly to get everyone involved. The kapha is going to bring snacks for everybody and make sure everybody has water. And all together, they're going to get that rock out of the way or build the next route. And so I think it's a nice story because we can kind of each see ourselves in I definitely kick the rock first.
Yeah, I do a little bit of kicking and a little bit of snacking myself.
Kicking and snacking
Yeah.
alternate. I love that.
Yeah, it's, I mean, a good reminder what you said before about, uh, these things aren't black and white, they're not good or bad, these are qualities. We have them all, right, inside of us. Some of us tend towards one more than the other, and that's where those dominances and needing some of that balance can come. Now, I know that Ayurveda originated in what's now India, and so another thing that I understand about Ayurveda is like it's very related to the seasons as well, and our climate and the foods around us. And I think that can be a little difficult for some folks to wrap their head around. Well, how can we? And like I'm in Ontario. I think you're in Montana. Yeah. So, very different climates from most of the Indian lands. And so are these still, yeah, like how do you still apply these principles to a very different climate, a different, way of life?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, and I think this is because where we see Ayurveda and where things were written down and kept is India, the subcontinent of India. The Indus River Valley is very much in the foothills of the Himalayas. Um, Probably went through multiple climatic changes. Probably a big reason why there are many abandoned settlements. The river courses changed. It was always in the ancient texts written about the great Sarasvati River, which we cannot find today, except finally through satellite imagery, they have found the old riverbed of the Sarasvati River. It was very well described. And of course, they say, oh, it's legend, it's this, that. No, this was a river that rolled down from the Himalayas that brought life, that brought energy, that brought, silt and good soil and all of these things. And it might have been somewhat seasonal, but that ultimately changed. And so there have been many climactic changes for the history of Ayurveda, which actually could easily go back 24,000 years, could easily have been another 24,000 year cycle before that that we just have no written knowledge of. So it may have weathered multiple and spanned multiple types of climate. It is employed as the main medicinal type in Tibet. In and in it, Ayurveda is the doctoring for the Dalai Lama. It was this doctoring when he was a child living in Tibet. So that's high, that's cold, that's dry, that's windy. It's not always moist and warm and tropical. So I don't. The Indus River Valley is actually where Pakistan is today. And then that whole area moving down south was where it spread to. And even there's some evidence um of these people and their traditions coming initially from what we would now term as Mongolia, Siberia, through the Caucasus. I think that's still sort of uh, an idea that's up for grabs, and the theories are changing even from what I learned. And it's merging with a lot of new historic research and new archaeology and new paleochemistry, and we're starting to see the people that are connected. So it's very exciting if you want to go down that rabbit hole. But I think what was really well recorded, just like in Chinese medicine, was what was done for the royalty. And so, you know, you've got all of these the whole goal is to like keep the royalty alive, keep the royal lineage alive. Same for Egyptian, writings and stuff like that. We have more information from uh, those eras, those dynastic eras, than we do from just daily life of common people, unfortunately. Um, and so seasonally, when I learned, and we're talking about India, and we're talking about like 8 different seasons in some areas, you've got the wet season, the dry season, the wet cold season, the wet warm season, the dry, blah, 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 blah. So they're cleansing kind of all year long to try to meet those seasons. But yes, for us that are me in Montana, you in Ontario, we have pretty much 4 distinct seasons. And so really, this kind of ties back into the question about the doshas. What's the most important thing to consider about your dosha, and how to find your dosha when you're sort of in doubt? Pitta is like undeniably hot. Your skin is warm most of the time. You are prone to perspiring or even sweating. Your skin will have a more reddish glow. Uh, you know, you're warmer. Vata is cold, cold, cold hands, dry hands. There's no swelling in the hands. Kapha is cool, moist, warmish, moist. Somewhere in that you touch that person's hand, their hand is a little more moist, it's a little more plump, there's more to it. Vata is dry, dry, dry. Pitta is moist and warm unless they've just burned that moisture off, and then they might be warm and dry but rough, right? And Kapha is, again, oily or moist or plump skin. And then it's down to stimulation or tranquility. Kapha is very hard to get riled up. Pitta is super easy to stimulate and get riled up, and Vata is all over the place, stimulated and hard to calm down and be tranquil. So these are kind of 3 areas of temperature, moisture, and stimulation, level of stimulation, that we can really relate to easily when considering the doshas, and then we can apply them to the seasons. So a cold, wintry season, even if there's a lot of precipitation, so like BC might have cold, humid, lots of snow, even here in Montana, it's more humid than in Colorado. So that cold is like chilling. It goes to your bones, right? Um, so it's colder and more humid. And so we need to have remedies for that that are warming and drying, but not too drying, especially because every time we go inside, it's dry and hot inside. So these are difficulties about winter is you're outside and it's cold and damp, or outside and it's cold and dry. Then you go inside and it's usually heating systems usually make it dry, not like you're going into a steam room. So somehow we have to balance the two, right? Spring, depending upon where you live, it's always a struggle because there's a lot more solar energy in spring and people tend to run out and take off their clothes, and expose themselves to the sun, which in fact I did just the other day going into winter because it was sunny and I got warm and I suffered the next couple of days. It was a good vata smack. It was like, hello, the sun might have been nice, but the air was not. And so does that solar energy actually penetrate you enough? And this is the typical kid that runs outside in the spring in their t-shirt, plays until dark, doesn't have a hat on, comes in the next day, they're sick because what happened is their body temperature dropped down. The change was too rapid. And spring is this in and out, where you have to really ease into it slowly, depending on where you are. Even if you're living in Florida, there's going to be subtle shifts. I definitely spent a Thanksgiving in the Tampa area that was like 45 and windy, and it was horrible because everything, 45 Fahrenheit, everything in me was expecting warm, moist, and it was cold and windy, and it just wrecked my system. So even in places where it's consistently warm, there are variations that we would call seasons that we need to address from the perspective of our doshas. There are hot and humid summers, and there are hot and dry summers. And a hot and humid summer is not where pitta needs to be. A hot dry summer is more tolerable by a pitta. A hot humid summer is great for vata. A hot dry summer is great for kapha. So moving between these seasons, if everyone could be analyzed at birth and you're going to go live here, you're going to go live here, according to their doshas. When we talk about herbs, it's amazing how the herbs along the Colorado, the US Rockies into the Canadian Rockies are all herbs that are, almost all of them are suited for pitta kapha. So
Hmm.
they're bitter, they're astringent, and some of them are therefore cooling and drying. And it just made me ask, like, why would that be? Well, because if you're a vata, you don't want to live here. If you're pure vata, you do not want to be where it gets cold and windy and dry. And so, interestingly, you know, the herbs are there to maintain the health of the people that thrive in that environment,
Right.
and the animals, by the way, because it's not just for us, they're eating them too.
Yeah.
First,
There's so much to touch on. I want to just go back a little bit to something you said earlier there that it's just such a great reminder about the seasons and also the reach of this knowledge and understanding, which maybe today we sort of associate it with a certain area of the world, but actually these sorts of concepts, in my understanding, um, have touched a lot of different cultures. A lot of different cultures have been working with this, yeah, as you said, traditional Chinese medicine have their own system, but a lot of the fundamental principles are the same as Ayurveda. I would say the same with Western herbalism. A lot of these different traditional systems are because they're reflecting natural processes and natural forces. So there is a place for them anywhere you go, and also bringing up the climate changes that have happened over the thousands of years, and also that, yeah, we really don't know how old these schools of thoughts and philosophies are. And I would suggest likely they're as old as we are, you know, that people have been observing and putting, applying that to their lives. It is an interesting thing in our modern day when we think about this idea of progress and human evolution and how we've somehow gotten smarter. But I mean, when you look around, I'm not sure I'm convinced that's true. And I just, we think about what we must have known and been able to do to have survived before we even had the kind of technology we have today that allows us to be much more comfortable and safe in a lot of ways. Like, we must have been brilliant. That must have been, yeah, you just incredible, ingenious ideas and thoughts. And yeah, so just
Yeah,
want
when the
to,
city wall crumbles, most of us aren't suited for living that life. You know, it's,
uh,
I mean, I just think about just even people migrating west from the east, that when the east got civilized and the people decided to spread out. But imagine like you're in a wagon, you have horses, you're moving west, you're trying to beat the winter, but when you get where you're going, you're not going to go just move into a house. You have nothing to live in. Like, you have to build it. Like, I can't even build a shed for my sheep, that's going to stand up properly. And my learning curve, has been enormous. And having animals is great because you really have to take time and observe them and see how they respond to different things. Watching how when it's icy and cold and they get to where they just want to stay indoors, the stress levels go up because of their interactions with each other, because they're not moving as much, because they're living in their own waste, because they're not getting as much light. And thinking about ourselves, closing ourselves inside all the time, and how this affects the way that our bodies operate naturally are designed to operate. And changes are still happening. Climatic changes, there's climatic catastrophes that we've seen, massive extinction events that we can kind of map through fossil record. Um, some things happen kind of all of a sudden, but a lot of things happen subtly. And I don't know where you're at with this, but I'm noticing, I mean, we never talked about solar flares when I was a kid. And all of a sudden it's like a daily report. And so I don't know if it's because of that I'm feeling it, or if because I'm really feeling it, or because maybe I felt it as a kid because I feel some of those same things. And now maybe I have something to attribute it to. But we are a ball hurtling through a vacuum, and there are things hitting our planet all the time. And more, we could go down another rabbit hole understanding why cultures, other civilizations have been through this, and more we are going to be feeling the effects of this. We move to a particular area. We are used to it being this way. You and I could have a summer that never gets warm, or we could have a summer that never cools off to a frozen winter. This could happen this year. Like, these changes, you read the Farmer's Almanac, you read, you know, I used to read Laura Ingalls Wilder. I read it all when I was a kid. Really informed kind of who I am and where I am today. The weather patterns that they went through living on the plains of the US, which extends up to where you are, crazy stuff. Crazy stuff. Like extremes from summer to winter. We've had a pretty good row for a while of pretty, dependable weather patterns. It doesn't always stay the same. And it's the same with the doshas in us. We are not always the same. There are so many influences upon us, and we have to know. Just because you could go lift 350 pounds last week doesn't mean that this week your body is ready to do that. And so, how to be encouraging to ourselves, how to be disciplined, how to be, moving in a positive direction, but also to be gentle and say, today is different than yesterday. What feels right today?
Mhm. That's a really good point. I think that's something that more holistic. health approaches really see for one, the individuality between different people, and whether that be using a dosha system in Ayurveda, we'd say constitutions and Western medicine. So, number one, identifying that everybody just fundamentally is a unique individual and has their own requirements, although there is, clues and a little bit of a blueprint to help us figure that out with those constitutions, but that can all be changing exactly every moment. Everything is changing. And that having that ability to, see that and work with that, I think is such a key to getting positive results. And when we're working with ourselves, having an attitude that is open to that change. I see a lot of people struggle actually with taking care of themselves, and a lot of that has to do with being really attached to an identity of, like you mentioned in the beginning, when we use that as an excuse, like using your dosha or an astrological placement or sign as a, well, I'm just this way, so there's nothing I can do about it, when really it's such an incredible opportunity, but it's very uncomfortable to change. You have to kind of change who you are to heal, or to, you know, really try to get the best out of your life often, and that's really uncomfortable and difficult, so we are
That's the
lucky to have
hormetic effect that we talk about in holistic medicine. A little bit of a stressor, a little friction, a little discomfort, elevates your body's responses. And that's what helps you grow more muscle. That's what helps you mount a response to illness. That's what helps you make your own antioxidants to combat free radicals that are coming in to your system. And we do live such um, artificially comfortable lives, relatively speaking. We all have this kapha, the imbalanced kapha acquisition disease. We want to accumulate things that are beautiful. And it has gotten really out of hand for us in society because we see what other people have and we want that. And these are like pitta kapha things, that have gone out of balance and we never feel like it's quite enough. Um, these doshic imbalances can be, we could write a whole like dissertation on groups of people that were conquerors, groups of people that were, went and took what other people had, groups of people that worked very hard to create extreme comfort for themselves, and how those things eventually fall. And that, those that know how to live in harmony with the environment of this planet ultimately are the teachers that come back and rebuild civilization after it falls. That story is told. You can see it in the flood of Noah. You can see it in Zoroastrianism. You can see it in Mayan myths and Incan myths. You can see it in Egypt. I mean, it's every culture has its story about um, mass extinction and coming back from that in some way. Someone who started things over again. Um, the thing with Ayurveda, the core understanding that I really want people to reach for is that we are born, we're conceived, sperm and ovum, with a core doshic combination from the influences, the elemental influence of the mother and the father at that moment of conception. That is so your kind of dosha goes back further than your astrological sign, right? It's more foundational. And when we are born, we may already have doshic imbalances based on, what was going on with mom, what was going on with dad, what was going on during the whole, you know, gestation and birth process. And so it's really our duty on a cosmic level to learn about ourselves, to find how to be most aligned with our divine nature, which is that doshic combination we were conceived with, that is not going to change, and be aligned with that and be nourishing the positive attributes of that pitta kapha, that vata pitta, that, whatever it happens to be, so that we are not living in sin. And I love this because, I mean, we're all growing up in this sort of modern influenced time where the word sin immediately, oh, I did something bad, I'm going to get punished. Sin, the word for sin is vikruti. Vikruti is a word that is used to define your dosha right now. And if you have illnesses, vikruti is your sin. You are out of alignment with your divine nature that was, you know, your nature upon conception. When you're not aligned with your divine nature, when you are in vikruti, when you are in sin, you suffer. I want to bring this to us here in North America because I want us to understand that no matter what your background, this term sin and all the translatable languages, it means you are not aligned with your divine nature, period. And you're going to suffer as a result of that. And that everything you learn how to do to take care of yourself is to get yourself back in alignment with your divine nature. In other words, if you are a larger boned, fuller figured person with great muscle definition, do not try to be Kate Moss, a supermodel with barely any meat on her bone. You will suffer in so many ways. And
Right.
if we can accept who we are and we can be the best of who we are, what we get in return is a long, healthy life in order to elevate our consciousness, learn the most that we can, have the most experiences possible in this body so that we can do it again better next time. And so there is no mistake. There is no wrong. There is only experience, perception, understanding, digesting that experience, learning from it, and going on to have another experience that better supports your alignment with your divine nature. So it is, I mean, there's so much forgiveness in Ayurveda. There's no, oh, I'm Vata Pitta and I ate the wrong thing. No, 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 no. I'm Vata Pitta and I ate that. How do I feel? Now I can laugh about that. Next time I'll be like, I really want to eat that, but I know it's going to cause this. And sometimes we'll be like, worth it. And sometimes we'll be like, no, 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 I don't want to feel that way tomorrow. These are the choices we make every moment.
Yeah, that is just so lovely and such a breath of fresh air to hear that description. It's a really, pr this is gon this don't let this come across wrong, but, like, pro-life, and I don't mean as an anti-choice thing. This has nothing to do with children, babies, any of that stuff. I mean, like, it's for life. It's promoting life and saying, "Here are the tools to live a good life." With what you've got, the materials you've got, and that seems just, like, so empowering, so, encouraging, so playful in some ways, and so very different from a lot of the attitudes that folks have towards health, towards our own bodies, towards ourselves in this day and age, and also in the greater messaging even of a lot of wellness communities. I find this to be
Yes.
very rampant. They're based on sales. They're basing on a lot of not everybody, of course. There's so many wonderful practitioners and holistic thinkers and teachers that I have loved and learned so much. But we know that that is part of it. That also reminds me of what you were saying before about there being like a bigger Pitta Kappa imbalance in the world, or that sort of like our greed is associated with that bigger societal. And of course, the as above, so below is a common sort of understanding, although there's different ways to describe it across many of these traditions and in astrology as well, and other things that are happening on a macro scale often are happening on a micro scale. There's a reflection there. And that's really interesting. I'd love to just dive into that a little more because talking about so like a bigger is it a planetary imbalance? Is it because of us people? Like what's that bigger imbalance going on?
That is that's a great perspective. I mean, planetary. I mean, why do you think the planets were given, these names of Greek gods? And, I actually sadly, I don't know a lot about Vedic astrology, and I know about Greek astrology because it's so common vernacular in my culture, right? Vedic astrology is a little, I don't have the terminology, but in Western society, we have the Greek Western astrology, and each planet and planetary influence is given these attributes, right? And in fact, um, many much greater Ayurvedic doctors than myself have talked about modern society is very out of balance in a Vata Pitta way. Pitta, Vata, Vata, Pitta. I've never actually said Pitta Kapha. That just kind of came out uh, today. We'll coin that for your podcast today. But the greed, the acquisition, the need, and it's never enough. The uh, ambition, the overtaking, the feeling like we have the right to come in and tell and control. And that is absolutely a pitta kapha imbalance on a global scale. And the personal vata pitta imbalance, oh boy, am I experiencing that a lot right now. Like, I mean, friends, co-workers, it's like, could you, like, 5 days have gone by since I sent that email. Could you have said, like, received? I got that email. People are just dispersed. They're out to the four directions. They're not following through on things. Um, they're, I mean, I would say since 2020, nobody's completely come out of the shell. It's been very hard for people to be in social situations and be in situations where they're being put on the spot, even in a Zoom meeting. People, I don't have colleagues that do this, but I've heard many Zoom meetings or, online meetings, people don't even put their face up. They put a little avatar of their face. So there's fearfulness, melancholy, hiding, you know, a little bit of sneaky deceptiveness. There's dispersion, there's anger, there's reaction, there's blaming, there's, so these are the ways that doshas are sort of out of balance all around us right now. And the only way forward is to really return to observation. Ayurveda was born from observation, and Chinese medicine was born from a lot of the ideas that were written in Ayurveda, but I think that it split off much earlier before things were written down in the Vedas. I think the influences were there from trade long before and moved into a different part of the world, and through observation developed their own treatises, their own tomes that are applicable in that environment. And we have to stretch a little bit, whether we're taking Chinese medicine or Ayurvedic medicine or Unani Arabic medicine or anything else, and we're applying it to us today in a Western world. And so it's important to view the elemental influences archetypically, like we can almost animate them, give them personalities, like I did with the story about the doshas and the humors, in order to understand them better and apply them to ourselves. And the God, the rabbit hole we could go down on: as above, so below, as without, so within, the macrocosm and the microcosm. I mean, let's just break it down. I mean, we talk about this in Ayurveda as you're getting into the philosophy of it. It's really quite phenomenal, because if you think about what you learned in school about an atom, about a nucleus, proton, neutron, about these electrons circling it, about, I mean, if you look at the size of the nucleus and you look at the distance between that and an electron, I mean, it's infinite space between that nucleus and that electron. And the space between us and the sun is infinite space. If you make the sun our nucleus and you make all the planets, these electrons circling around, I mean, it's very, very similar. Very, very similar. It's just that it's moving in a much slower timeline. And in Ayurveda, everything is animate. Everything is animate. It's just, what is its timeline? So if I'm looking at the stone cliff face in the canyon behind me here, I don't see anything moving. But one day, a shard of that wall is going to fall off. because there are forces on this planet of gravity that are constantly pulling on it. And even within that rock face and every single element in that rock face, on an atomic level, there's frequency, there's movement, there's vibration. There's more space in every single thing around us than there is solid particle. And yet I cannot get my hand through this table. It's frustrating in a way because it's so like I know there's more space than solid matter in this world. Why are we so trapped in solid matter? Why are we so trapped in things being the way that we see them? It's quite incredible that we managed to hold things for so long as they are. That you managed to hold that your hair is black, you're brown, almost black, that I managed to hold that my eyes are green, that I managed to hold that this is my house and doesn't just like shimmer and disappear. It's quite phenomenal that that is the world that we live in. Um, Anything that we put our attention to, we can change for better or for worse. And so it is all about pausing, observing, having a viewpoint on what we want to change. What does better health look like to me? If we bring it back to Ayurveda and health, we are so, as you said, identified with our shortcomings, with our, well, even if we were always told that we were a good looking child, a pretty child, a smart child, a funny child, we'll be attached to that identity in a positive way. We'll think we always have to be that way to get that praise, to get that acknowledgement, to get that love. So we're very attached to this. And when we have an illness, especially if it has a diagnosis, a name, like it's in the black book of Merck, the Merck manual, it's in the, the medical book, and it has a definition and you can Google it. People identify with that. The first question that any practitioner, herbalist, Ayurvedic practitioner, holistic practitioner, or medical licensed doctor should be asking their patient is, who would you be if you were healthy and well? What does healthy and well look like to you? Describe your day to me. Because what we may be reaching for that patient may not be what they are reaching for. It may not be even something that they've ever seen in their life, that level of wellness that we may be striving for them.
Yeah, that's a really good point and really good reflection for anyone working with other people. I think one of the things that is so incredible about learning, um, is you always hit a point where I mean, you hit this point many times, I think, in your life if you're someone who's interested and curious. You have this awakening. It happened for me with the herbs. You get really into it. You think you know a few things, and then you just hit this wall where you go, "Oh, I don't know anything." Like, I actually know less than when I started because there's too much to know, and that reminds me a little bit of what you're saying. I think when we're starting on our own healing journey too, we don't always actually know how well we can be. And that's actually so out of reach even in our imaginations at times cuz yeah, we haven't had that connection to that version of ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
That's really
Have you ever heard the
important.
story about the little girl that her parents always used to take her to the Natural History Museum of Natural History, whatever, and there's a giant, like life-size whale, blue whale, hanging from the ceiling. And every time they went in, the parents were like, "Look at the whale." And she would look up and she would just see blue. Go back again and look at the whale. She'd look up, she would just see blue. Like the parents knew it was a whale, even though all they could see was the belly of it, because they'd seen a whale before, because they'd seen it in a video, they'd seen it in a movie, they'd maybe saw it in the ocean if they were lucky, but probably not. But they saw a representation of it. This child is like learning what is a whale, and every time they look up, they just see blue. It's the same thing as the four blind men touching an elephant and describing what it is. And
Yeah.
each of them is only touching one part of it, and you can't say what it is. And so until we know what is possible, we're not going to be able to dream or visualize or even describe optimum health for ourselves.
Yeah.
And so somehow, and this is actually, it's a great moment to uh, discuss, because we can talk about herbs and we can talk about the special qualities of different herbs. We can talk about the energetics of herbs and that there's drying herbs and warming herbs and cooling herbs and moistening herbs, and all of these meet the dosha. There are certain herbs that, above and beyond their doshic and elemental qualities, have a special potency. And despite the fact that they are cooling, they're really good for kapha and vata, because they have a special potency. For example, is just an example. The most important special potency is between the practitioner and the patient. And this is what is disappearing today with telemedicine, virtual medicine, with AI medicine. Type everything into a virtual doctor and you get a printout. Is there's no special potency between the practitioner and the patient of, tell me what you want for health and let me tell you what is possible. Let me hear you. Let me digest this with my Agni. Let me provide you with a possible solution and guide you in the implementation of that solution. Let me tell you where I think we're going. Why don't you tell me where you want to go? I mean, if somebody comes to you with no arms and no legs and says, to be truly well, I want to be able to walk. Well, now we're going to have to really have a discussion about what is possible for this person, right? And the doctor has to listen and has to digest and process this information that is coming from that patient, and then has to, can't just scoff and be like, well, that's ridiculous. You have no legs and no arms to even propel yourself in a wheelchair. So what are we going to do about that? That's unrealistic. So somehow this prabhava, the special potency between the practitioner or the doctor and the patient, there has to be trust, there has to be belief, there has to be communication. It has to go both ways. In fact, in Ayurveda, there's treatises on finding the perfect patient. It goes both ways. It's not just the patient finding the perfect doctor. The doctor is going to be futile and feel useless and be frustrated and get burnt out if they are constantly working with people who have not identified what wellness even looks like to them.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like that special potency you're talking about is relationship. And that is so interesting to think of too when we think about herbal formulas and how putting herbs together can actually increase the potency of both of them, and make them more effective, and they really help each other along. And then we also look at the societally what is happening right now with people moving away from that and really not doing well. That does not seem to be benefiting us. The more, like, there's so much incredible, us being able to have this conversation, you in Montana, me in Ontario, love the computer for that, love the Zoom, love the however, it's certainly not a full-on replacement for having, deep in-person connections with people, with plants, with our environment, all of that. And yeah, such an important part.
I love that you talked about herbal formulas, and that's great because you took it the next step. I was thinking even about the relationship between each particular herb or plant and us, or an animal that eats that or seeks that out for some reason at certain times. I love, like, your cherry tree, like you're watching it in the summer and you're like, I'm just about ready. And one morning before you can get out there, all the birds have been watching it too. And they got there before you did, and that is just like the biggest cosmic joke, that happens so many times in this kind of environment. I'm just like,
It's pears and swirls for me, but
oh
yeah.
God, yes. And bears and peaches where my brother lives in Colorado. It's just, but even when we talk about um, plant medicine also for potent healing journeys of the psyche, And that many of the, you know, cultures are saying, we learned about this from the plant. The plant taught us. We learned about these combinations from the plant. And that's in Ayurveda too, is probably in Chinese medicine. It's like, how did you figure this out? It's not like, oh, here's a one weed and here's another weed, and let me see how do they taste together. It's sitting with the energetics, creating a prabhava, a special potency between, I don't know if I say that right in Sanskrit. That's why you have to just excuse yourself from, I don't need to speak Sanskrit to learn Ayurveda, and neither do you. I don't even know if I say it right. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. It's understanding that there's a special potency between now me and the plant. And I have so appreciated coming to Canada to learn at some of the conferences and to teach at some of the conferences. I learn way more than I teach, and the constant uh, um, inviting and mixing and learning from First Nations teachers. I remember one woman, she told the story of never go to somebody else's land and take an herb. Don't dig it up. Don't harvest it and take it home and make money with it. Like, go if you were invited, sit, make a relationship with that plant, understand the plant, then invite the plant to be closer to you. And I can't remember what plant she was talking. I feel like she was talking about yarrow, if I remember. And that was my same thing, was yarrow. Was like, I found one plant in a dry little pile on my property one summer, and I was like, oh my gosh, look at you. Oh, so just one of you. So of course left it alone. I went over the rock wall sometime this summer to realize my neighbor's pasture, which actually it's an abandoned property, I had no one to ask, it's full of yarrow. And I was like, oh, it's all right here. How come it's over here and it's not on my property? And it was like somewhere right in that moment that I got that teaching from her. And I was just like, it would be lovely to see you over here next summer. And I have yarrow everywhere now. I have yarrow
Oh, like,
everywhere.
it's so amazing building those relationships and having those experiences, and once you start having them, they just don't stop, you
They
know?
don't
I had a
stop.
similar thing. I had this one time bone set came into my
Oh,
consciousness very strongly for a while. In the spring, I was just kind of obsessed with learning about it. There's a few plants in a park near where I live, but I don't I didn't grow it. I didn't have a lot around me other than those few plants that I'd known for years. They were there because I'd lived nearby for years. I've been walking by that trail forever. And this spring I was just obsessed with it and thinking about it and learning about it. And one day I'm in my garden, which is on the top of a dry hill. It's like a desert up there. It's like it's built on sand. It's high up. In the summer, it gets so hot and so much sun. Boneset is like a swamp plant, right? There's a boneset plant growing in the middle of my mugwort. And I'm like, what are you doing here? Hello, welcome. But like, how did this even happen? This is not your habitat. I didn't plant you, maybe by accident. I don't know. But yeah, I'd never put seeds down. And yeah, and these things just, they happen over and over again. And this is that amazing magic of that relationship with plants that, you know, it happens, you know? How do you explain it other than to tell the stories? But it
I love
happens.
hearing that from you because I've been like, did I just, I'm more aware of it now. It was always here, but until I really studied it, I didn't really see it. I mean, I walked on this property in 2020 and I saw St. John's wort everywhere. So, okay, I recognize that, and I just have made it my mission to educate people about St. John's wort instead of calling it toxic and eliminating it. And then I have this idea about weeds that until we identify them as useful and we find their place, this applies to us people too. Like, what is the dosha of the what's the dosha combination of the St. John's wort? And let's honor it and let's raise that up. And once you acknowledge it and you start utilizing it and making relationship with it for that, it's no longer a weed, it's no longer a toxic thing. Now it's, you're controlling it by making it a part of the community. You know, oh, my lawn is full of dandelions. Well, try picking and eating a few of those, and then if you just mow it and waste it, it's going to come back like crazy. trying to say, I'm here. Wait, you didn't see me the first time. I'm here, you know?
Yeah.
And then starting with St. John's wort, but I can identify 20 medicinal herbs on my property as of summer of 2025. And where did they come from? And even some I was studying to teach to a conference, and I was like, this should be here. I haven't seen it. I wonder about these. There were like three more herbs that I wanted to teach about, but I had no personal photos of because they weren't on my property. And literally, now this site had to be my own awareness. I walked out with play with the dogs. I come back and I'm like, there's purslane, there's shepherd's purse. I was like, what? When did you get here?
It is, there's definitely something to be said about it being in our consciousness so we're more aware. But that bone set thing really threw. I was like,
Uh-oh.
no, this feels a bit more than just that. But that's definitely true. I like to do a little test sometimes with myself to see if I'm, to see what's happening, where I look for the four-leaf clover. So I just say to myself, okay, hello, I'm here. I'm in this bed of clover. And I'm interested in meeting, the four-leaf one. And I often find them with that sort of, yeah.
Without
So
telling.
invite, like, it's an invitation to be like, my consciousness is here. I'm wanting to uh, connect with you. So if you're around, let me
That's
know.
awesome.
That's such a fun thing to do. Yeah, there's so much. I mean, we could go talking on and on about herbs. And of course, I'm coming from the Wild Rose College of Herbal Medicine. But as we know, herbs are just one part of a bigger way of living in life and taking care of ourselves. And I know that Ayurveda is way more than just herbs. Nutrition is a big part. There are many other ways, methods, and substances. And oil is a big part of Ayurvedic practices, using different medicated oils and things like that. But what would you say are some really accessible and really nourishing practices that come from Ayurveda that we could really benefit from right now in this time and age? And
Yeah, it's funny because whether it's Ayurveda or just holistic medicine, uh, I always tell people like you have to eat anyway, so you could eat right for your dosha. You've got to move anyway, so you could move properly for your dosha. You have to live in a house anyway, but you could live in a house that's appropriate for your dosha. Um, and even if we don't say dosha, I say there's all these things that you need to do anyway. And so in that sense, they're free. But if you're not going to do these things for yourself, then you have to pay someone to do them for you. So you have to come to a herbalist, you have to come to an Ayurvedic practitioner, you have to come to a physical therapist, a massage therapist, a medical doctor, to apply these things to you at a point when it has gone too far and you did not do them yourselves. And so, I don't let anyone complain about the cost of care because I'm perfectly happy to give you lots of free suggestions ahead of time. And I say it about supplements too, in a bottle, a pill, a capsule. You know, here's a bunch of free advice on how to get your quercetin in your daily diet. But if you don't, won't, can't, there's a pill for you. And that could be applied to a powder. It could be applied to a tincture. It could be applied to a body worker, an acupuncturist, and, all of these things. So a few things that people can really implement that, are just about daily care. I think one of the first, you can't do anything with someone about addressing their symptoms or their deficiencies or even dietary changes if they're not sleeping well and not managing stress well. So how's your sleep? Number one question. Let's implement Ayurvedic sleep hygiene. Let's get you on the proper sleep schedule for the dominant doshas that are affecting your rest and recovery, right? And so the problem is, again, identity. A vata feels most vata when they stay up late working on a project, repainting the living room, reorganizing their closet, talking to a friend on the phone all night, being there for in emergency mode for somebody else and not taking care of themselves, right? They're very hard pressed to implement a self care strategy of closing the bedroom door by 9 p.m. so that they're asleep by 10, of leaving all distractions outside, of not having any lights, of not having any computers, no phone, no nothing like that. That is just not what the Vata wants to do, you know? It's like I watch my daughter and she's just like, no, but I have to talk to my friends because they need me. And then she's up talking and she falls asleep on the phone, or she falls asleep talking to a friend and they leave the house later. I'm like, can't get her to implement that strategy. Pitta wants to multitask up until the last minute. They're in bed on their computer sending those, like, just a minute, honey, I'm going to send just a couple more emails because I am important. I am so important to this company. And if I do not send these emails, it's going to fall apart. Nobody can do anything without me. I have to control everything. So okay, I'm done. Close the computer, set it down by the side of the bed, because in their mind, they're like, I might need to check that in the middle of the night. The pitta is the one that's like, well, I can't turn off my cell phone because, someone in my family in another part of the country might need me in the middle of the night. Like, there's just these responsibility ideas that the pitta has that prevents them from implementing the sleep strategy that they need. Kapha can go to bed late. They need the least amount of sleep. The problem with the kapha is they got to have like 5 consecutive alarms, getting them up, because they are like, oh, I don't really have to get up at 7. I could push to 7:30. Yeah, I could. And so we all have all these, right? At given moments, we all have all of these.
I
And
feel very called out with the kappa thing right now, though. Yeah, that is
very
100% me.
I'm seeing you. I'm seeing you. I can see your beautiful hair and I see your beautiful skin and so I'm seeing you. And then where is your weakness? That, gosh, if I went to bed too late and now I don't want to get up. And if I did get up, you have to set yourself up to succeed. So, okay, I got to get myself up at 6. Okay. I know it's still dark out. I know it's still cold. 6, hit the heat, put that yoga mat on the floor, lie down, start rolling around until you feel like moving. Like, get yourself set up to succeed, or put something cozy out so that you can put it on right away in the morning, so that you can go down, so that you can make your bitter tea with some spices in it, so that that gets you compelled to be moving. Get a dog that's a freak at 6 in the morning and you have to go out and walk it, like you have no choice or you're going to have a mess in your house, right? Like, set yourself up to succeed. Just going back to sleep, kaphas get into cycles of napping and resting during the day, which makes their nighttime sleep not so good. And then it's just this sort of vicious cycle. And also, when they feel heavy in their body and congested, they don't want to move. So there have to be outside influences that are implemented. So sleep is a huge thing. And then I think just with food, it's easy. Vata likes crunchy, snacky, dry foods, and that is the opposite of what they need. So self-care for a Vata is warm food, cooked food. Even if you want to do a smoothie and a juice, warm it up, make it room temperature at least. Even better, grab soup. I tell people, this is crazy. Flying on a plane is the most Vata action that we do as humans. Your feet are not on the ground. Many flight attendants, especially back in the day when my aunt was a flight attendant, are already Vata because they wanted them to be thin and model-like. The health problems, the multiple sclerosis, the nervous system disorders, the chronic fatigue, the fibromyalgia, the anxiety, these things that, like, talk to flight attendants and see what's going on with them. The best flight attendants have a kapha nature because they can actually manage the effects of being up in the air. And what do you get on the plane? You get pretzels and other dried snack food. The only good thing for Vata is that it's salty. Salt is good for Vata, so that's one good thing. People fly and then they think, well, I'm not moving, so I'm going to be healthy and have a salad. Cold Raw salad is the worst thing you can have when you're traveling by air, even once you land and are in the airport or once you get home. I would rather people, this blows people's mind. I'd rather you buy a quesadilla, hot, cheesy. I'd rather you have a slice of pizza than eat a cold salad. Like, that is just not a typical nutritionist's advice. It's the energetic of the food. Unctuous, warm. Unctuous means oily, warm, cooked, pretty easy to digest. Everything's already like practically mush anyway, or get some soup. Even better if you can sit down and have a whole meal. So it's just a weird advice. It's outside of the norm. Oh, I didn't do anything today, so I should be healthy and have a salad with cold chicken on it. Ugh. You know what's going to happen? You're going to have gas when you get home, and that's what they have. Bad gas, bloating, cramping of the stomach, lack of
Yeah.
energy. So vata needs cooked food, warm food. Strong pitta, so in hot days, humid days, you just got to have more juices, more fresh greens, fresh, not hard cheeses, but like fresh cheeses and yogurt if you tolerate dairy. Coconut based things if you don't tolerate dairy, and cut back on the spicy food, the fried food. What's so funny about India is there's this history of street food that is fried, super spicy, hot chai. I remember being in India and just being like, this is so not Ayurvedically aligned. And the Ayurvedic doctors will tell you, you've been eating street food. That's why you're so unhealthy, because that's attractive to them. That's not what we want to be eating in a hot, humid climate. We don't want to be having extra alcohol. And what do we do? July 4th barbecues here in the US, and you've got your own holidays where we do that, right, in the summer. And then kapha wants heavy, or they want lasagna. Kapha wants lasagna, and kapha needs to have, a very simple grain and legume combination with a few seeds and a bunch of bitter veggies. Yeah, but kapha wants lasagna. They want it to be cheesy. They want that pizza. So these are the difficult changes to make, but you need to eat the opposite of where you are out of balance. And if you look at your craving early on as you're becoming more healthy, the craving will tell you run the other way. Like
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
that
Except when I'm flying, I can have pizza, right? That's the
when you're
the
flying, you
one.
can have because you're in a excessively vata state. Yes. And then
Yeah, do
bathing,
you
we talked about body oils and stuff, and how we each bathe can be something we do to take care of ourselves. And just briefly, if you're vata, warm shower, steam, you want to oil your body before and after. If you're pitta, you want to have a cooler shower. You might oil the body before, but not likely after, right? And you're not going to go in a steam on the regular if you're pure pitta. I'm a combination, so I don't steam in the summer, but in the winter I do, right? And if you're kapha, better a dry sauna than a steam shower. You don't really need to oil up. You're going to produce all your own oil after the dry sauna, after you've really sweat and purged. A lukewarm shower just to rinse everything off and then let your skin breathe. So these are just little ideas of ways that we can even just, address our hygiene. And just to be clear, in Ayurvedic medicine, in Ayurvedic ideas, nobody uses soap on their skin. You can soap up the high bacteria places, yes, your hands, obviously, if you got them dirty, all your sweaty parts, private parts, in between your toes, but do not soap your face. Don't soap your skin. That's what dry brushing is for. The more kapha you are, the more vigorous. The more vata you are, the more soft. Dry brushing, and then everything in between on that spectrum. And that's how we get the dirt off. We brush it off.
good to know.
No.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense with the soap thing. I think that is we are over soaked. Didn't they even I thought in Canada at least, I believe we were on track to and maybe I guess it didn't go through, but I thought they were gonna actually outlaw antibacterial soaps because of how they were contributing to
Resistant.
antibiotic resistance. But then COVID happened and they didn't, and then they continued pushing using them. I believe that this was the
We got
order
trickness
this
and
happened.
outlawed here before that, and it did not come back.
It
So that
didn't come
was,
back,
and
okay.
most of the hand sanitizers during COVID had they were on to just like alcohol. Like you look at all the wipes that were on planes, they were just pure isopropyl
Yeah,
alcohol.
I'll have to double check exactly what happened, but I do remember feeling a little outraged around that time and being like, "What? We were, like, making a
We
good
were so
step
close.
and then backtracked." Amber, I did wanna ask you, so, this sort of comes into this again, uh, being really strict about things, in my experience and as a practitioner of Western herbal medicine, I find it's better to start clients off, like, very slow and not make huge changes, all at once. They won't stick to them, they're not practical, and often, depending on individual people's lives experience, what they have, access to, not make recommendations that are really gonna be difficult for them. And then when we go back into, again, sort of this, big commercialization of the wellness industry, one of the recommendations I often see on, like, Instagram Reels and stuff when it comes to Ayurveda is one that I have a lot of trouble with. It's the, "Don't reheat food."
Mhm.
And in, like, our modern day of people dealing with food insecurity, with people being pushed to their limits time-wise, like, I that just it really rubs me the wrong way to hear that advice, while I understand philosophically and energetically where it's coming from, the realistically implementing that for so many people is not realistic, and
No.
and when I hear that, all I can think is, "Well, what do you do with your leftovers? We're not throwing them out, not in this day and not in this day and age, not with the cost of groceries, not with the amount of people that could benefit from food, and, like, I'm not contributing to more food waste." So, what would you suggest around that? Of course, trying to portion better, but, what do we do?
That's a wow, what a great question. Yes, and I wanna come back around, you said strictness, and I wanna come back around to this concept of orthorexia, which is so rampant. Like, I've got to do it the right way, I've got to do it this way, which is its own illness, and we have to be flexible with ourselves. This idea of, leftovers being tamasic, which is heavy, they can be congesting, they can lead to ama, which is toxicity in some people. If we if we take it back historically, you would never have given leftovers to royalty. Okay, so royalty will always get the best, the first. So, what is celebrity lifestyle? It's royalty. What is Instagram and social media? Being like a celebrity, which is being like royalty. Living my life as though I am a celebrity too. Making my own Instagram account, and then I can also be royalty. So, there's this delusion or an attempt to even manifest something that, I mean, people are living like royalty. Large number of people are living like royalty relative to historically, right? So that is taking that idea, and it rubs me the wrong way too because I hate wasting food. Now I live on a regenerative farm, so everything that I cook is usually either from the farm or from a friend's farm, or I got it organic. So a lot of it can either go right out to the chickens or it can go in the compost. When I had a pig, it could go straight to the pig. So that was cool. I was like, what I ate, the pig can eat. So if something was just over, but then there's things that I'm like, I don't even think I want my animals to eat this. But let's talk about day old leftovers. What tamasic means is it has, um, it has started to decay. It might bring more ama, which is toxicity to your body, instead of agni, which is fire and brightness and light. So how do you take day old, 2 day old, 3 day old, 4 day old leftovers? We just had Thanksgiving, so turkey, man, that's extending. Like today would be a week since Turkey Day. I'm still eating turkey. How do you infuse that with agni? And this word agni is fire. It is the fire of digestion. It is the fire of hormones. It is the fire of intelligence. It is the fire of understanding. It is the fire of understanding. There's like 40 some different kinds of agni, and they're in every single tissue. So this leftover food that you cooked fresh, And then part of the problem is we put it in the fridge. Because yogurt is a leftover food, but yogurt is very well defined in Ayurvedic medicine as this living food because it has organisms in it that are keeping that agni alive, right? But a leftover that we maybe it had meats in it, maybe we put it in the fridge and now I have that same thing. I'm both kind of repelled, but also I don't want to waste it. It's this struggle. I sense the tamasic nature of it. I've eaten food in restaurants where I'm like, this food is dead. They're like, yeah, it's dead. Like we do kill a cow before we eat the steak. Like, duh. I'm like, no, the food has no life force in it. How do you put that life force in it? First of all, you can remake leftovers. And the best thing is to do is to get, start to learn about 3 or 4 Ayurvedic spices that are good for your constitution. You know, buy them powdered or grind them up and put them in a shaker bottle and make that your little blend. We call that a churna. This is one of the most accessible things. That churna then goes on like everything that isn't flavored the way you want it. So you could take leftover meat and mashed potatoes and greens and put it all back in a skillet and put this spice on it. Now we're putting agni back into it. So that's when you're in your home and you have control over your cooking. You reignite the life force in that. And that's what herbs and spices are really, really good for because they are concentrated. Plants are solar agni turned into matter. It's the communication of the sun with us. It is the translator of solar energy to physical matter for us humans and every other living thing that eats plants on this planet. It's the most sacred thing in the world. Spices are the pure expression of those plants where all of that agni is concentrated, right? An aromatic herb, an aromatic spice, a seed, something like that, the fruit of something. So these are potent little packets and they literally inoculate something that otherwise might be tamasic and heavy and dull and weigh you down and ignite it with this agni, this fire again. If you're out eating out, if you're in a restaurant, if you can't access that, it's here. So the idea of the diksha, which is this giving of your own agni to something before you ingest it. And some people say, rub your hands together, ignite agni and the friction of your hands moving together, clap, spend a minute, like warm up your hands if you're good at that. And just put this concept, this like put your own energy into your food. If you're going over to your family's house and they always make this casserole that you just like, oh my God, you use like canned soup and store-bought breadcrumbs. This is horrible. I can't eat this. I don't eat this. It's not a part of my diet. I'm on an Ayurvedic diet. I have an Ayurvedic doctor. They told me I can't eat it. No, I've done that. Grandma, I don't eat meat. Well, I made chicken. I love that one with my grandmother. I don't eat meat. I made chicken for you. How do I like not be stressed out, but put the love and the light back in that food so I can eat it with gratitude? And that is really how we have the power with all of these electrons move around all of our neutrons and protons and all the space that's in between and this that we manage to hold and present every single day. You don't think that we have power to change what's on that plate in front of us before we eat it? That's what saying grace is about. You can turn saying grace into whatever you need to turn it into. It is a pause. It is a gratitude. It is I don't really like what's on that plate, but I'm going to change it right now. Not changing it from like, one culinary design to another. I'm changing the energy of it because I don't really have a choice right now. I need to eat these leftovers. And we can teach kids to do it. It can be like, there's like virtual restaurants now. Have you seen that? Like
What?
they're finding a way to change how you perceive what you're just eating mush, but you put on this like virtual thing
Oh,
and by seeing something different you taste something different and
I
scares
don't
the it scares
yeah.
me, but if that's possible to induce that in somebody, it's possible for us to induce it in ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, it comes back to what we were saying about the consciousness thing, like, we're putting our consciousness onto that food and saying, I'm, like, choosing to take this in as something that's gonna be more nourishing than I might otherwise have experienced. And, yeah, we are so powerful. Yeah, it's not gonna change a green bean casserole to a, freshly made nice curry or something, but, yeah,
But it
it
can
will
change how it affects us, and it's when you have to eat out or you have to eat at the local little, like, food truck or you have to eat at a friend's or family's and they just can't understand what your diet is, the stress of saying, "No, no, no, no," is so much greater on your body than saying, "Oh, thank you for making me dinner." And just taking a moment inside yourself, let's say grace, and inside yourself, you're saying, "This is going to my greatest good. This is going to," and chewing it thoroughly, spending time with it, because probably it's tasty. It just wasn't on your list. You know, leftovers can be super tasty, but if you've gotten it in your head that they're like bad for you got to get that out of your head because I agree with you. Like waste is worse than anything. That's not sustainable.
I love that. Thank you for those very practical tips too on yeah, on working with that because I just couldn't wrap my head around, throwing out food being somehow better. I refuse to believe it. But I was like, but I understand there and there must be something we can do. So that's great. And
Well,
again,
that's a great
the
question.
yeah, and again, like it brought us back to that talking a little bit about that orthorexia and that pursuit of perfection in health, which is something that I've come to believe doesn't exist actually. And as we mentioned before, everything is constantly changing, and that includes every cell in our body, every part of us. We are always balancing, imbalancing, rebalancing. Things are always happening. There's no end to the health journey. There's no pinnacle or peak. I don't think really in this life. And it's all a process and journey and our needs change and shift throughout our life. So messaging that seems very common these days around and just like fads too about health and like you said about, a Kappa could never be a Kate Moss figure, and it's like and that was in style for a while, and then it wasn't, and now it's coming back, and we're all susceptible to this messaging, these ups and downs, so yeah, what are some of your tips for avoiding getting caught up in this idea of being perfect or trying to attain this certain level of health?
Whatever the current perfect is. I mean, that's just it. I mean, Ayurveda is perfect for that because it identifies all of our differences and every one of them is okay. Every one of them is acceptable. And uh it also lets you make mistakes and chalk it up to experience and say, well, but I learned from it. If you're not learning from it, well, I don't know what to say. That's a different thing. If you're not learning from it, you don't love yourself yet. And so that's what we're working on is self-love. And orthorexia is a type of self-punishment. If you don't know what it means, it refers to trying to adhere to an idea or a type of a regimen. Usually it has to do with diet and lifestyle that you have decided it has to be this way. So you're going to try the keto diet and you are just like measuring multiple times during the day and you're weighing and you're doing, or you're going to be, you want to eat less animal products. So you go all the way, you just drop all animal products and go all the way to veganism and you're strict and you want to push it on everyone else and you want people to, acknowledge you for what you're doing. Like, didn't you know I'm vegan? Why would you offer me that? Instead of being in the spirit of it, right? It's orthorexia is another way to punish and limit ourselves. I'm just going to say it like it is. It is. It's another way for us to say that we are bad and that we have not achieved perfection. It's another way to create control mechanisms around ourselves. And it's where the diet, even if it's a good dietary plan or a good exercise plan or a good yoga plan, yoga posture plan, if you are rigid about it, not disciplined, rigid, there's something else. underneath that, and you're raising your cortisol levels and you're causing um, damage to your body because you are stressed about maintaining that line, whatever that line is. I need to include the orthorexia person in my little fable about the boulder and the in the road. There's like, it has to be done like this. It's about control. And when we want to have control, we are feeling out of control in other parts of our lives. So we find one place to control. It could be that we try to control our spouse, we try to control our child, we try to control our coworkers, or we try to control what we put in our mouth or our exercise regimen. And so it's a deeper question. And this is why the special relationship between the practitioner and the patient is so important, because even if you're like, well, but I'm an herbalist, or I'm an acupuncturist, or I'm a radiologist, or, that doesn't mean you can't hear where someone is coming from and be the one to reflect back to them and say, it seems like really what the problem is you're not giving yourself a break. Um, what will happen if you give yourself a break? What will happen if you fall off of that? Let's do a little thought experiment. What's your goal? Got your head down digging like a platypus digging a burrow, it's just, what's your goal? Where are we going with this health regimen? What is the end goal? Well, I want to lose 10 pounds by da 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 da. Okay. In Ayurveda, I'd be like, give me your wrist. Okay, my fingers don't meet around your wrist. Okay. That means you're kapha. You have a large bone structure. Your fingers don't meet around your wrist. Okay. So we're going to have to do this a way that is special for you, not the way that your friend did it, not the way that so and so on Instagram did it. We have to do this in a way that is special for you, because you are special, you are unique. And so you're coming at it from that point of self-love from the beginning.
I love that. That's it. Yeah. I feel like we don't heal through punishment.
No, no, not of ourselves, not of others.
Well, Amber, that feels like a right place to leave us off today. I know I've really pushed our time limits, but it's been such a
Wow.
pleasure to chat with you.
Yeah, these are conversations we could do all day.
I know. So many rabbit holes we didn't touch on yet, like the solar flares. That one I was really interested in. Anyway, we'll
I
have to
know. We
do
were like,
another.
"Well, I see that hole, but why is evident?"
Yeah, yeah. I'll listen back and just like pick out the things we didn't touch on, and then we'll have to do
Ooh,
another episode on all of that.
let's
But
do it.
for now, I'm sure there's a lot of our listeners are going to be wondering where they can connect with you or find you. So can you share with us your where to find you?
Sure. I mean, my full name, Amber Lynn Vitale. You can find that on Instagram. You can find that is my website. And there's just different things I've written and videos that I've done over the years. I can be found on the Wild Rose College website. Um, yeah, those are pretty much the ways you can
Great.
reach me through those
Okay.
media.
Well, thanks
Thank
again for this
you.
chat. It's so lovely to spend some time with you
Oh,
and get to soak up some of your wisdom.
well, thank you for bringing all of these ideas to people. I appreciate it.
Okay. Talk to you later.